So we brought this up the other day with Kamala. I forget the exact topic it was. Maybe it was it wasn't fracking. I forget what it was. Maybe it was just in general. And I said, listen, I will always give grace to people for changing their minds because I want to change my mind. I want to have the freedom to change my mind on an issue, and I have many times in the past. So I never want to, just lock someone in on an opinion they had years ago. But I heard Glenn Beck say years ago that you have to have a pivot point. There has to be a moment or a series of things that happened that you can point to. I can say, this is what I used to believe. Then this happened. Therefore, I now believe something different. And Kamala's never given that pivot point. So therefore, I can't trust anything that she says is different about her worldview back then. So I just thought of that when I'm hearing your story. So where were you? What was your pivot point? And now where are you?
Well, first of all, let's just let it be known that Kamala's pivot point is based on the weather. She's always going back and forth based on what her handlers are telling her at this point. But my backstory, I grew up in a very far-left family full of progressives and leftists, and I had this mentality that I needed to view the world through the lens of being a black man and that I was this oppressed individual. So much so that, like a lot of people in 2020, I started doing more research, but mine was because I was actually cast to be on a Netflix reality show where I was going to teach people how to become a BLM activist. So in order to prepare for the show, I wanted to make a whole series where I was debunking PragerU videos in effort to study the counter arguments so I would become better at debating. And for a series of months, I accidentally red-pilled myself because one by one, I just kept debunking my own narrative rather than the PragerU videos.
Guys, that's amazing. Well, by the way, what is this Netflix show? Did it ever come out?
Yes, the show is still active. It's called The Circle, and it's similar to Big Brother if you've seen Big Brother, but with this show, some of you are catfish and some of you are portraying some other character online. You don't actually meet your contestants in person. You're all in different apartment rooms. And my whole character is I was supposed to pretend to be this woke white girl online teaching people how to become a BLM activist. My name was supposed to be Samantha. And after I realized that I've been wrong about BLM, I've been wrong about all these different woke narratives, I just couldn't do it anymore. So 3 days before I was supposed to fly out and film the show, I backed out of the show and decided to choose my integrity first.
That's a ridiculous story. But that still says a lot about you, right? Why have an open mind? Because listen, we're all confronted with evidence that is contrary to what we believe, but we ignore it, right? Because we'd rather not confront, we'd rather not have the courage to confront the idea that maybe we're wrong about something and have to change our friend groups, or perhaps, as you were talking about, even confront your family on these things. That's very, very difficult for a lot of people to do. How did you do that?
Well, it was the first time I researched without confirmation bias. When I as I was growing up, I was constantly hearing the same narrative that black people are oppressed, that black people need to be leftist, all these different things, all these Marxist ideologies. I grew up hearing those over and over. So when I was preparing for this show and I was seeing videos from the likes of PragerU, it was making me so angry because they were right. So in order to be able to properly debunk them, I said, you know what, I'm going to take all the blinders off, research this as objectively as possible, and you can only sit there and look at the truth and be in denial for so long before you get to the point where you're starting to gaslight yourself. And I knew that I wasn't willing to continue with this narrative anymore because over and over and over, all of the facts were aligning against the side that I stood on. So I just had to finally accept that, and I'm so grateful that I did.
What has the effect been with your family?
All of the above. I had some family members who were like, about time you see the light. I have other family members who have started to see the light with me. But at the same time, there are family members who disagree with me, but they're cordial. But I also had a lot of family members who, to this day, have disassociated from me. Even my eldest brother, he refuses to speak to me over almost 4 years later. He has still refused to have any relationship with me because of politics. My father and I, we didn't speak for 2 years, but we finally have become cordial again due to some tough conversations. But now we just don't talk about politics. And ultimately, that's all I think it needs to be. We don't have to talk about politics. The love should be so much deeper than that. But unfortunately, some of my family members still don't see it that way. They view me as a KKK member. And for those who don't know, I'm a black man, so I don't know how that would benefit me.
Yeah, I'm sorry you have to go through that, man. That's hard. That sucks. What were they? Are they still so passionate about, or what are they clinging to? That if you could just trigger one thing in their brain, like you could just toggle one switch in their brain, would you untoggle to have them be like, oh, yeah, I'm not stuck on that thing anymore. That's not true.
Honestly, from what I've noticed at this point, it's just the ability for black people to not have groupthink. For far too long, black people were told that we weren't allowed to think for ourselves. And unfortunately, so many black people still have that same groupthink mentality. We're the only demographic that moves in a pack the way that we do, where 90% of us for so long have all aligned with this same ideology. Because I have certain family members who have very conservative values. Like I have family members who grew up in church, who had military parents, police officer parents, so it would make sense for them to be more conservative. And when I read between the lines of some of the things that they say, everything aligns with a more conservative perspective, except when it comes to racial issues. When it comes to racial issues, they throw all logic out the door and just go straight to this narrative that we are as oppressed as if we were the slaves that Harriet Tubman personally left behind. And that ideology is just so outdated.
Let's go to the documentary, and then we can circle back around to what you just said. Their lives matter. Who are the there?
They are the forgotten children of crime in America, which more often than not is children. So many people are focused on these fraudulent movements such as BLM that they have neglected to pay attention to the fact that there are thousands of children that have been senselessly murdered due to violent crime in America, and no one is doing anything about it. In fact, the district attorneys of a lot of these progressive cities are borderline incentivizing for more crime, incentivizing for more criminals and thugs on the street. And children are more often than most people would ever expect tend to be the victims of these violent crimes.
How wild that you need to make a documentary that says, hey, maybe we should care about crime victim children. You know what I mean? Like their story doesn't get told. What is that about? That the greater priority is on the criminal.
You know, it's this Marxist ideology that has infiltrated our media system, where so many people believe that they need to run with BLM's narrative, and because someone like George Floyd died, yes, it's unfortunate that George Floyd died, but nobody wants to actually pay attention to the circumstance because it's more convenient for legacy media to go with the narrative that the white man is oppressing black people or that police are these terrible people. So now they've convinced so many people that we should hate the entire demographic of people who are hired to protect us. So it has gotten to the point where no one is paying attention or having any sustained outrage when it comes to children being murdered, which happens much more often than anybody is realizing.
We were talking the other day with John Lott, and he does all the crime statistics, analyzes them for the FBI, et cetera. And he said that the Department of Justice's numbers, not the FBI, because those are not complete, the Department of Justice's numbers show that over the last 3 years, Kamala and Biden, there's been a 55% increase in violent crime. 55% increase, because this survey takes into account crimes that were committed but not necessarily reported. Maybe there weren't police reports, but they do a crime victim survey of 240,000 people. 55% increase in crime?
Wow.
Is that what you've seen in your research as well?
Honestly, I knew it was high, but I didn't know it was that high. That's insane. Like, my jaw just hit the floor. But I'm not surprised. I mean, look at the progressive DAs that they've endorsed that have let our cities just go absolutely insane. And, you know, similar to that, if you look online, it'll show that in Chicago you have basically over a 50% chance of getting away with murder, at least with minimal jail time. Yes. I spoke to a couple of detectives off the record while filming this documentary in Chicago, and they told me that they believe the real number is well over 90%. You have over a 90% chance in a city like Chicago to get away with murder with very minimal, if any, jail time. And that's why it's this is something we need to pay attention to. What are these policies that they're putting in place that's allowing this to happen? Because it is so unbelievably out of control.
It's amazing that the party that gets credit for caring about the children or whatever has been so off course that they care truly more about the marginalized prisoners, the marginalized criminal, than the victims of crime. That is so insane and must be turned around. What do you want people to walk away with your documentary?
A few things. I want people to be aware of what's actually happening. We get distracted by so many fraudulent movements, again, like BLM and these Marxist ideologies, that we tend not to pay attention to the real issues that are happening in our own communities. We hear these massive stories and see household names be made of the likes of Breonna Taylor, even though no one is actually reporting the proper information, that so much so that we are neglecting what's happening in our own neighborhoods, in our own cities. So I want people to, one, walk away with awareness, and two, I want people to go out to the polls and make a difference. I want people to know who their district attorney is. I want people to go out there and make change and demand that we stop having these soft on crime policies. There's no reason that we should be getting rid of the 3 strikes rule. If someone has committed a violent crime twice, what makes in a third time? Why would you not think that they would do it a 4th time? So here in LA, I can't wait to see Greg Gascon get knocked out of the LA office. So that is what we need. We need change, and change is much more attainable than most people realize.
Like people have been arrested like 38 times, like in the world. We got to run here, but give me one fact going back to your red pill journey. How many ever years ago? What was one fact that you came across that you were like, oh wow, what? That's totally different. That's the opposite, actually, of what I was told growing up.
Wow. I would say the fact that I always thought that police officers were hunting down black people, but it turns out you are, as a black man in America, unarmed, I am 5 times more likely to be struck by lightning than I am to be shot and killed from a police officer. That is how unlikely it is. And for so long, I thought I was going to walk outside and become the next BLM hashtag, but that's so far from the reality because I don't live the lifestyle of a criminal.